You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In this episode, we're going to take some time to delve into the Board of Appeals decision for the biorefinery, discuss some of the matters that came up at the County Council meeting at the April 1st meeting. And then we're also going to check in with some local community members about their local concerns as well. In the studio to do that is Dr. Joe Venosa from Salisbury and Mr. Mike Goldberg from Delmar. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming out.
Always my pleasure.
So we covered the biorefinery quite extensively.
Yeah.
Very happy to hear that the Board of Appeals did vote 5-0.
Yeah.
I make the motion that we affirm the zoning administrator's decision, that it was not an accessory use.
A motion, Mr. Turner.
Second.
Second, Mr. Ennis. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion from the zoning administrator's recommendation or okay, decision, yes. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
To not allow them the variance, right?
It was quite a meeting.
Yeah,
I think there's 8 parts of it on YouTube for the Pack 14 site.
Mike got a medal for setting up early and staying through the whole thing and then breaking
Good grief, I
down.
didn't get home till 12:30, and my wife was starting to wonder if I had a girlfriend or something.
Well, if it's any consolation, friends were texting me all across the county, being like, "I hope Mike's okay. He's hanging in there."
Yeah. So, well, Mike, thank you for sticking around to that meeting. So let's talk about that process. You were there to witness it. There was another item on the agenda, but let's focus on the biorefinery. They heard testimony not just from Mr. Cathuria, but also from the community as well. Correct?
They did, and some of the neighborhood residents around the biorefinery. They didn't speak till the end.
His name's Lee Richardson. If he is going to grow chickens, he should have a letter of intent. When you buy a farm, doesn't mean you're a farmer. I'm a 6th-generation farmer. I've been growing poultry, grain, all my life, 30-plus years. I'm very well experienced. We don't compost our manure. We compost the dead birds to get rid of them. If we let scientists make the rules and not politicians, there wouldn't be a litter problem. But here we are. And I don't care if it works. The only question here tonight is whether it is right for the zoning. I was around in 1997 when we made the right to farm law and a lot of that information, and I was well involved, and I've been involved ever since. In my opinion, this is not agriculture. It's not a normal practice. That's what the right to farm law protects, not new technologies or anything. If you want to do new technology, you go through the process.
That this industrial operation is unsuitable for A1 zone neighborhood. And further, want to thank the board for acknowledging this as an industrial use, not an allowable accessory use in A1, and it does not belong in a residential neighborhood. Thank you.
The evidence, the issue was so clear, I think, to the board members that they didn't have to listen to 100 different residents speak.
I mean, at the end of the day, he filed permits with the county government to have a storage facility, not a biorefinery. Is that the most accurate way to say that?
Yes, essentially that's the case, but it was not a storage facility. It was abundantly clear upon inspection by the county inspector that it was, in fact, a manufacturing facility.
So, Joe, I mean, we've covered here that Raj Cathuria, he's on the Maryland Agriculture Commission, the state commission.
Yeah.
He is actually not someone who's from here. He now owns property on Atkins Road. We know that.
Yeah.
We know that there was a failed attempt to put a biorefinery on the east side of the county. Fortunately, out there, one of our neighbors who owned the property realized that he was doing something that he shouldn't have been doing and terminated the lease.
Yeah.
Come to find out a couple years later, owns a piece of property.
Mr. Cathuria, how exactly are you affiliated with International Biorefineries?
I am 90% owner of that.
It's your company, it's fair to say.
Right.
And that company is also referred to as InBio, is that correct?
That is correct.
And InBio received a grant from the Department of Agriculture, a $1.9 million grant back in 2020, is that correct?
That was part of the things that were required. Our proposal was a on-farm proposal.
So you didn't need permission to transfer it from the first property to the property that you intend to put this on now? Is the zoning of each property something that is discussed?
The zoning was not discussed, no.
What kind of message do you think it sends to residents of a county like ours that the state ag commission is supportive of this?
I think it teaches us the age-old lesson of follow the money, because you never know where it goes.
Mike, you've been a victim of weaponization of government.
You certainly have.
And you have, I mean, there's some concerns that Raj Kathuria has some ties to local elected officials, right? I mean, we don't know how deep these are.
We don't know if he has ties or not. The only thing we know is that we've seen Mr. Kathuria photographed with the county executive. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything there, but it could be. And you also have to question, the simple fact that he is on the Agricultural Commission. Did he get any kind of preferential treatment to obtain the grants? I don't know. And now that if this does not go forward, and right now it's not going forward, but it will very likely be appealed to the circuit court. That's his final, Mr. Kathuria's final avenue of relief.
The resolution that was just approved by prepared findings of fact that we have to do within 45 days. After that is approved, then upon my signature and that date is when you have 30 days to appeal.
You say that the circuit court's its final stop, but it's not necessarily. We saw this with the planning and zoning with the downtown density. It can go to circuit court, especially if you have enough more money for lawyers.
Well, it could go to the appellate court and ultimately to the Maryland Supreme Court. So,
do you think we could see this come back to like a planning and zoning type of issue where they actually start to change text amendments to allow biorefineries in the community?
It's certainly a possibility. Of course, I hope that does not happen, because that would be, I think, very unfair to the residents.
Did the county executive, has she interacted with y'all in any manner? Has she expressed a position on the biorefinery?
We hadn't heard at all from her, and so one of my neighbors did contact her directly, and we did get a statement that she was in support of not putting the refinery in that location. So I don't know if she, is in favor of being somewhere else, but she did say that she didn't want it in this location.
So, Joe, back to the question I had asked you, you see that maybe there's not a level playing field.
Oh, no, not at all.
So what can we do about it?
Well, I think, as always, citizens have to educate themselves about who campaign donors are, or perhaps are. What is the position of local officials on these issues? I think it's quite stunning that for certain elected officials like our county executive, who make entire 15-minute social media spectacles about the dog kennel issue, on this major issue about the health and well-being of citizens, not a single public statement has been made.
Bigger than just Mr. Kathuria and this one biorefinery, this is I think a mentality that they have over in Annapolis, that they can just keep pushing this stuff here, and we need to stand tall.
Never doubt that a small group of concerned citizens can change the world.
Thank you.
Who is going to protect the next neighborhood? I mean, we saw with Shadow Hills. We're seeing it now with Canterbury. We need our government to work for us, not behind us. Is that fair?
Well, that's wonderful in theory, but in real life, the politicians have a strong tendency to work for themselves, as Joe Venosa said, follow the money. And right now, we don't have any kind of connection. And we've looked. It doesn't mean it's not there. Doesn't mean that it is there. We just don't know.
But we could put aside the money for the moment and just look at it in terms of how politicians could be deferential to certain influence. Because, again, I find it interesting that just a few weeks after her inauguration, she's up in Annapolis to publicly meet with Mr. Kathuria and these folks, and how other people seem to, because perhaps of their financial influence, their influence on the state ag board, there really is, it's like the old George Orwell quote, some animal, we're all equal, but some are more equal than others. And
From Animal Farm.
Animal Farm.
Yeah. That's an awesome book, right?
What a tie-in to the biorefinery.
Yeah.
So pigs aside, I think the county executive and other officials that perhaps are looking to incur influence and have connections to the state, I think they tend to just gravitate toward those people of influence, and it doesn't give the regular citizen, the regular Joe, perhaps a lot of confidence that when there is something like this biorefinery issue, that they'll be heard because they're regular people.
All too often we found, and we saw the same thing with Shadow Hills, trying to put on turn this tract of county-owned land into an off-road venue immediately adjacent to a very stable residential neighborhood. I'm sorry, this not only is wrong under the zoning code, but it's ethically and morally wrong. And I have another question about this. This was funded at least in part through grant money. So if he can't move forward, if Mr. Cathuria can't move forward, with this manufacturing facility on agricultural land, what happens to that grant money? Does it just go away? Does he put it in his pocket? I have no idea.
Mike, you need to go out and earn some more for the next project. Well, so speaking of county business, when we come back from the break, I want to go over the county council meeting. We finally got the financial budget audit. And really want to dive into that because we're getting ready to dive right into the fiscal year 2026 budget.
Not a moment too soon.
So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. I wanted to take some time to discuss the county council meeting on April 1st, specifically the financial audit from fiscal year 2024, which actually closed 9 months before that. 9 months, and also talk a little bit about some of the other county business. In the studio still with me is Dr. Joe Venosa and Mike Goldberg. Thank you guys for sticking around.
You haven't run me off yet.
Yeah. So let's dive into some of the easier stuff. They had a public hearing to expand the right to farm, which is something that the state of Maryland's allowing to also commercial fishermen. This is something the West Side Commission has taken up.
And expand the notification requirement to include the right to conduct commercial seafood operations. Maryland law with regard to the right to establish the Right to Farm Act committee. It also had language in it that allowed the Right to Farm Act committee to hear seafood related matters as well.
To me, I see this as a chance the government has had a chance to hear from their constituents and is acting on it within the realm of what's legal. Is that right?
Seems like it.
Yeah. I know this is probably a little bit more something that I'm passionate about. I'm in the wholesale seafood business.
Yeah.
I own farmland. I own a business. Anything we can do to be more business friendly, because as we're about to talk about the budget season, the state of Maryland is, in itself, the federal government in itself, and trickling down to the county, is making it as hard as possible to be a small business in this area right now, and it also being a taxpayer. So,
that's a bit. All right, where to begin?
Well, let's begin with 2024 because we finally got the financial audit. Ashley Stearns from PKS was there to present the budget audit.
My name's Ashley Stern. I'm a partner with PKS and Company, and we're your auditors. With me tonight, I have Ryan Taylor, who's our manager in charge of the audit. Really, as part of the audit, what you're having an independent party come in to do is issue an opinion on the financial information within this document. The primary government has an unrestricted net position of $99.82 million, or about 34% of the net position. That's a $56.86 million increase from last year. Our general fund revenues increased from 2023 by $26 million, and that's mainly due to 3 areas. 1, an increase in our income tax revenue from the state of Maryland. 2, an increase in our investment income from 23 to 2024. And lastly is the American Rescue Plan Act grant monies, which were mostly recognized in fiscal year 2024. As you can see over time, especially post the pandemic timeframe, we've seen an increase in our overall health of the county, or our fund balance. Taking a look at the budget to actual numbers, which starts on page 119 of the financial statements, actual revenues were $26 million greater than budgeted amounts. This is made up of a few items. First, our income taxes was $12 million more than the budget. Our American Rescue Plan Act funds that we were able to recognize in 2024 were $5 million more than the budget. And our investment earnings were just over $10 million, which were 5% more than the budget. Milgip, as a note, actually saw a 2% increase in their investment rate last year, contributing to that increase in the earnings. Actual expenditures were $16.16 million less than the budgeted amounts. There were significant savings in a few departments: Public Works, Detention Center, and Public Safety. Taking a look at the trend over the past 6 years for the Solid Waste Fund, revenues just over $10 million for 2024, where expenses were slightly down in 2024 compared to 2023, and that was due to some maintenance that happened in 2023. And overall, there's an operating income of $1.3 million.
Look, it doesn't seem to some folks like it's important, but this was due. State law says this was due 3 months ago.
Right.
The number one question that we've been asked, the council, or I have, is how come this is so late? It was so many months late last year, and now it's again. And then the year ended, June 30th of 24, and it's this late, that's a long time.
It is a long time. We can only complete the audit when we have all the information. It typically takes us 6 weeks from the end of our testing to be able to be at this presentation. But we received the information with this testing about 30 days ago, so we wrapped everything up and we're able to get it.
We don't see a lot of internal auditing done that is disclosed publicly, and I actually have some news there I want to share. But we have already had the county executive have a budget meeting with the Board of Ed folks, and even with her actual political party, which is the Delmarva Conservative Movement, where she has talked about, overriding the revenue cap for at least 1 year. And I think ultimately their goal is to get rid of it or modify it to a point that it's basically moot. Mike, you're the guy sitting here. You've worked your whole life, and you're the one who's considered on a fixed income. How do you feel about the possibility of paying more in taxes?
I just love the idea of giving more of my money to government, while I'm on a fixed income. It's very disturbing. Look, on a national level, we're seeing a lot of belt tightening.
Okay.
We need to see some belt tightening in this county. Exactly where, I can't tell you. I haven't done a review of the budget. I'm not part of the government operations. But government is, by its very nature, inefficient. There's no profit motive. And where you don't have a profit motive, there's going to be waste. So there's got to be a way to tighten our belts rather than increasing taxes.
But even before you get to that point, you got to at least know what you were receiving the previous year in the budget.
Well, this is the crazy part to me. It's not as if the county executive and the director of finance, Pam Olin, don't have some sort of idea that we have $85 million in unassigned funds, when last year we had 75. 5-6 years ago, long before the county executive was elected, we had 30-some million. The state of Maryland has said that we only need 2 months of unassigned funds in the bank, which is roughly about 40 million for a county our size, a little less than 40 million. We have double that, which, and the county executive states it, and I believe she's correct, it does help her bond rating. I don't agree with her that she built it, because this reserve's been there for a long time. And but when you're talking about raising taxes, and to use her words, it's kept $9 million in the private sector a year that by having the revenue cap. We need to fund Board of Education. We need to step that effort up. But to do so, knowing that you have $85 million of unassigned funds, and that seems irresponsible.
Well, it's irresponsible, but it's also how would I put this? It is a less than honest argument because of the fact that the revenue cap and the Board of Ed funding are two separate things.
Okay.
And one of the things that has frustrated me, and I've always been a very big advocate of public education, is the fact that there appears to be a political motive to try to frame this as some crusade to help the schools, when really it's an entirely different thing.
What is that thing?
Well, again, let's let's be clear, who are the most adamant entities in our county that want the revenue cap to go away? Generally speaking, developers.
Okay. Greater Salisbury Committee.
Greater Salisbury Committee, people connected to the political machine in Annapolis. And people who just honestly maybe think that a mechanism to raise revenue is always the default solution.
Well, even as a conservative myself, we've had 2 elected, Republican/conservative county executives who, when they were running on campaign, were for the revenue cap.
Sure.
Once they got elected,
Yeah.
both of them were wanting to get rid of the revenue cap.
And
that's disturbing to me.
Well, and again, I'm not even necessarily in principle for or against the revenue cap. But
Okay.
what I'm saying is these are 2 different issues.
All right.
And what she has done is she has hijacked education in a way that has tied into her bigger agenda, which I believe is a developer-backed plot to get rid of the revenue cap.
I've done some research. I've been on the county website. I've looked at the open checkbook system. In the last 2 years, there is a huge increase amongst not just the executive's office and her department, but also other departments that answer directly to her, in an increase in gift card purchases.
Yes.
And also local dining without any, at least public, explanation of why. And now I'm asking the question, where is this money? Where did it go? We heard from Councilman Holloway
he mentioned
on
this.
Tuesday that gift cards is one of the most unethical ways for a government to use their funds.
You can't track it.
Are you privy to the information that, or the audits that our internal auditor does?
We review those.
Are you familiar with the recent PCAUD audit?
I have not seen that one yet. Has that been issued?
Well, we just got it a week or so ago, but
Sorry, I have not seen that yet.
And what, when you see that, it kind of I'm looking at thousands of dollars here spent for gift cards. And the flags go up when I see that. And I'm wondering how deep into those kind of things do you get as an auditor to, make us aware, maybe if we don't.
I'll look forward to seeing what's in that report.
It's pretty shocking when you look at it. And we had this issue with the county, with the Board of Education a few years ago with gift cards. And gift cards are one of the biggest risks as far as abuse, that there is. I think you'll agree, if you've read anything about accounting or fraud or anything like that, gift cards they shouldn't even have them in government, for one thing, because they can be abused. But
now, if you look at the manual, so I've asked these questions. If you look at the manual, it says it must, and this is coming from the state, it must show the end user. So one of the areas I have found that have purchased the most gift cards is the local management board. Now, we've asked the question, Mr. Bosman just
Resigned.
disappeared.
Yeah.
Did he disappear because he was purchasing the gift cards? Or did he purchase because he found that the gift cards are being purchased? I'm asking that question now. That's going to ruffle some feathers. This is the question that has to be asked. And I'm talking $1,600, $20 or $2,000 at a time. And I've asked the question, can they find who the end user was? And then Councilman Holloway asked a similar question to Ashley Stearns from PKS during the financial audit. Okay. And she did not have an answer at that time. Now, you can't expect her to. She did say they would do more testing. I think our county council needs to get their internal auditor. I think they need to ask PKS to do more testing to find out where these are coming from, because 10 years ago, it was discovered that the Board of Education was purchasing gift cards and using them in a way that is not only not legal, but it's not ethical. Before we ever discuss whether we should raise taxes or cut funding, we need to know where our financial or where our elected officials are putting the money. I'm not saying under any circumstances the county executive is the one doing this, but she's the one elected as a fiduciary to look this up. Our county council, they've noticed it now.
Yeah.
So I was able to get access to an internal audit And in that internal audit, it was raised, and this would have come from Anjali Chantel's office, that they do tests. They did 500 and some tests. And there are purchases that don't show where the end user is. Not just in gift cards, but say two local officials go to lunch over at Mogan's Oyster House downtown, or Brew River, and they have a meeting. It has to state who's there at the meeting and what was discussed.
Right.
It's not on the public record.
Interesting, isn't it? And when you're doing a test, say 10% of those types of transactions, and you're finding some irregularities, then I think you have to dig deeper and maybe look into every single one of them. As a former banker, that's how we would be doing things. We'd be digging in deeper if we're smelling some smoke.
Well, there's one other area that I found that really disturbs me, and I found multiple ones, but this one specifically. The county executive has family that is tied into the Main Street gym, and by and large, they're a great organization that keeps a lot of kids active. But her family has some ties there, immediate family. The county executive did a $500 donation to the Main Street gym. Now, here's the problem. In our charter, it says that appropriations must be approved by the county council. Here's one example, and I'm not some sort of forensic accountant. I know enough to run, a couple successful businesses. Been blessed for that. I can read a ledger. I also know the family situation with the Main Street gym. If $500 to a family type of business is allowed, is $600 okay? Is $1,000 okay? What if we get it up to $9 million? Are we supposed to bust a revenue cap so that we can fund whatever? I don't know.
Depends on whose relatives are in that entity. I'd settle for just figuring out who's getting those gift cards.
Well,
I didn't get one, did you?
I did not get one.
No. Look, we have 10 major elected officials in our county. We have 7 council members, 1 executive, state's attorney, and a sheriff. And a lot of those folks do a wonderful job. But each of them did take an oath, and part of their oath is that they'll uphold the county charter. Part of upholding the county charter is that when there's an ethics violation or a misappropriation of funds, you have to do something about it. You didn't have to run for office. You chose to run for office. People didn't have to vote for you. They chose to vote for you. Once you're there in office, I don't care if you're the state's attorney, I don't care if you're the sheriff, councilman, or an executive, and I don't care if we agree. That's not going to happen all the time. But if you take that oath and you even have knowledge that the charter is being broken, and you sit and do nothing,
you're just as guilty.
You are actually you're the complicit accessory after the fact.
Well, it's like the analogy you used once a few weeks ago. A cop sees somebody getting shot, and if he doesn't do anything about the perpetrator,
dereliction of duty.
And this encourages more crime when there are no consequences. And all too often in this county, in recent years in particular, so it seems, there have been no consequences when there have been ethical violations or potential violations of law. I certainly do hope that the county council will start living up to their oath and taking appropriate action when they know that something is amiss.
Well, when we go to sit through the budget hearings that we're going to have for the next 60 days, and ultimately by mid-June actually have a budget that may or may not include a tax increase according to the county executive, these are the questions that all of us should be asking right now. And if you have any elected officials who are unwilling to ask those questions, I definitely think that going to a county council meeting, having your voice heard now's the time. Unless you're willing to pay more, and if you are, pay my extra too.
Give me a gift card at least.
Mike, I want to ask you, would you run us through one example of what it would look like for the revenue tax increase?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Okay, so here's how it works. We have a 2% revenue cap in Wicomico County year over year. Now, let's just assume that your home is has an assessed value of $100,000, and that we have a tax rate of 90 cents per $100 of the assessed value. that would generate a tax revenue of $900. Now, let's fast forward to the next year, year 2. Now, it's a good assumption that the value of your home, the assessed value, is going to go up a little bit. So let's assume that it went up to $105,000 from $100,000. Now, if we apply the same tax rate of 90 cents per $100, you'd have to reduce it down from 90 cents per 100 down to 0.8742 cents per 100. And that will lower your the tax that you pay to $918 instead of $945. So, stated very simply, as the assessed value goes up, then the tax rate must come down in order to stay within the 2% of increased revenue.
Well, and the county executive saying that she is not going to raise your taxes, only keep them the same to fund education, is disingenuous in the fact that because your assessed value went up, you still will get an increase. The county still will receive extra money, but just not as much extra as possible unless she busts a revenue cap.
Well, she recently stated that she guarantees that your tax rate will not go up. Well, of course the tax rate's not going to go up because assessed values are going up, so the tax rate must come down. So when she says she guarantees that the tax rate won't go up, does not mean that you won't be paying more taxes ultimately.
Joe, how do you feel about any elected official giving you a guarantee?
I'd be suspicious, or what is the old expression, trust but verify?
Okay.
But maybe not even that much.
I think verify, but not through social media.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that.
When we come back on Open Agenda, we're going to have Mike Lankford in the studio with us to discuss Salisbury housing and the density project. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with me is Mr. Mike Lankford from Salisbury, Dr. Joe Venosa. Gentlemen, thanks for being in here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So, Mike, we asked you to come in because we want to talk about the Salisbury City Council business regarding density. And, what's your background? And you seem to know a lot about it. I've seen you on Facebook. What gives you as much background as you have?
Well, I've always been invested in housing. I used to volunteer back in college up in Baltimore at a homeless shelter on the West End. I've always been engaged in that issue. More recently, I was working for Habitat for Humanity like 2.5 years ago before I got my current job as a property manager of College Park Apartments, which is located within the city limits.
So you're pretty well versed on both sides of managing properties and as a citizen here right in Salisbury.
Yeah, and definitely, personally, I've also experienced homelessness, so I feel like I bring that experience of caring about what happens to people where things aren't always going well in your life, right?
So, talk a little bit about the transparency level right now with the Salisbury city government. We know that the county government and the city government are in the process of splitting their planning and zoning. So it's not going to be a combined effort sometime later this summer, as we've heard. Have you seen a lack of transparency with the process, with like even the density increase for the central business district?
I think I think the city in general has a communication issue. I've seen other community members very concerned about like the email lists of like sending out briefing packets before meetings, just being able to. Of course, everyone who lives in the city or in the county is not paying attention, but when people ask and want to be engaged, I think it's to the detriment if you make that process harder.
So, Joe, you attend many city council meetings. I mean, speak a little bit about what Mike's talking about as far as the process as a citizen yourself. I mean, you're a homeowner.
Well, we've gone through a lot of, if I have a better word, drama over the last couple of years regarding, as you said, this real lack of transparency. And there seems to be a perception, I think, outside of the city council chamber that the city council specifically has really made moves to disincentivize public comments, public attendance at meetings, and even just general input. We saw a recent example of this, in fact, this past week when a local citizen, I believe his name is Mr. Riley Smith, went in and really, took the city council president to the cleaners on the fact that he has this habit, it seems, of purging names off of email lists to inform citizens about what's going to be on the briefing book and the agenda.
We've heard that from several folks.
So, this is not an anomaly by any means.
Yeah, I mean, and these are folks that regularly attend the meetings. They actually
They're the biggest civic-minded, sort of involved people in the community, and
most of those folks are open-minded folks. They're just really trying to get other people to show up and voice whatever their opinion is, not tell them what their opinion should be.
No, and it's a diverse group of people in terms of their background, their views, where they're coming from. It's again, you could make fun of it because you're sort of like a local civics nerd for doing it, but I think there's great value in that, particularly as we've talked about when these issues, and we've talked about this all the time, local government has such an important impact on your direct everyday life.
So we're going to talk about Matt Drew's comments at the last city council meeting. But before we do, I think we should back up for anyone out there who maybe doesn't watch this on a regular basis. About 2 years ago, Salisbury City Apartments came to the Board of Appeals. Now, the Board of Appeals is different than the Planning and Zoning Commission. They're two different ones. They both deal with zoning. Planning and Zoning basically plans out and sets the rules. Board of Appeals is the one you're going to get variances on. And a variance is different than an exception, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So Salisbury City Apartments wanted to build the downtown apartments that they're proposing in the parking lots. They went to the Board of Appeals, and they were turned down, and they appealed that to the Circuit Court, Judge Jackson. Judge Jackson said, listen, you can't grant an exception from the Board of Appeals. You could do a variance, but not an exception to density. So, and then it was actually appealed again and it was sent back. So then the developer from Salisbury City Apartments took a step back. They went to then Planning and Zoning to ask for a text amendment, which is a legal process to circumvent the current rules and implement new ones. That process we covered back in November of 2024. That seemed very staged. Many people spoke, most against it. The ones who spoke for it were somehow tied to the developer. And then they voted 6-1 instantly. They passed it. It went through 2 readings at City Council. They passed it. Unfortunately, 4-1. Randy Taylor, of course, vetoed it, and the City Council still pushed it. All right. So that's the history.
Yep.
The current is now the county and the city are splitting their planning and zoning. And Matt Drew's point, and we can discuss this, is that because there is a 5-month window that this is going to happen, that there is no process for a variance. But that's not accurate. Is that right?
Yeah. What is odd is that they're not dissolving the planning and zoning, they're merely separating them. So there is still going to be a process for them to get that variance. They may not be able to in the immediate, but it's not like they have to wait years for this. They don't even have to wait a year. It's a couple months. Mr. Drew is proposing a completely new and unprecedented system for us to approve variances through the city council.
Now, is this the three-step process that he laid out?
Yeah, in his comments, he laid out a threefold, which would involve public comment and all. My issue is there's a reason why these issues are not typically handled by the legislative body.
Well, and so just so everyone out there knows, in his three-step proposal, he outlines basically giving much more power to the city council for making text amendment changes. So they would almost change the rules of engagement, right?
Yeah.
So it's a great approach.
They wouldn't have to go to, say, the Board of Appeals or Planning and Zoning as they have in the past to get what they wanted for a developer in the future.
So Joe, I mean, someone who's
Theoretically.
a taxpayer in the city and someone who watches this often,
Yeah.
how would you feel about almost taking out a little bit of that check and balance and handing over the keys to just one legislative entity?
Well, I'd feel pretty worried, and I'd feel even more worried if I found out that there were political or financial connections between certain elected officials and certain developers that perhaps could benefit from it.
Okay, so let's state the facts on Matt Drew. I mean, he is on the Planning and Zoning, he's a member in good standing. He is also a member of the Greater Salisbury Committee. Is that
correct?
Those are accurate statements.
Yes.
So the Greater Salisbury Committee took an active role in increasing the density in the Central Business District. The only project that seems to be out there right now is the Mitchell's Landing apartments. How do you think that might tie into his abrupt request for a change in how we do text amendments in the future?
Well, again, I'm only speculating, but there are a lot of similar connections to the people involved. First off, I just want to state this is my own observation, but I firmly believe that Mr. Drew did not actually write the comments that he gave at City Council. I believe those were written by someone else. And if you actually watch the clip where he talks, there's actually a very big tell in that process. Now, again, that's just...
What's the tell?
Well, the tell is that as he reads it, and I've watched enough students in my years give public speaking to sort of tell when they're reading something that a friend wrote or that they got maybe from ChatGPT. And there's a moment there where, as he's reading it, you can see he actually himself is surprised by the text that he's reading. And so my assumption is that somebody else wrote it. I have my theories as to who that is.
If we're going to audit his class, we need to know that the doctor knows.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So Mike, you state that you come from an area, you understand homelessness. You've been somebody who has supported the arts, the fabric of this community. How does it make you feel when you find out that maybe the power is being consolidated into a smaller unit?
It honestly concerns me, not even because of I think a lot of times people read in like an insinuation of malicious intent, but the thing about abuse is a lot of times it's circumstantial. It's when there's
unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences for people where it's just having a lot of power invested in the few. We've seen time again through history. Joe, I'm sure Joe can give us a million examples of why that's a bad idea.
So what questions do you want to get answered before anyone even really considers Matt Drew's 3-step proposal?
I'd just like to hear a little bit more forthrightness as to why this is so necessary. I'm very curious as to the press to create a new procedure to approve variances or exceptions at all, why that's necessary. I guess that would be one of my first, is like, what is deeming this necessary? What was the impetus for this chain of action? Whenever you're doing something in government, you need a precedent. So what is the precedent? What is the impetus? What's the motivation? And I think we'll find a motivation, as Joe was saying, when we follow money.
So how do you think we go about this, Joe?
Well, following the money is always, I think, an important thing. And I'd be very curious if we are able to find out at some point in the future. For example, is anyone locally connected to the company that is currently involved with the rehabilitation of those homes, that project? Because in the last financial cycle, the Secretary of Housing, former Mayor Jake Day, provided a $250,000 grant check to Homes for America Incorporated. And while we don't necessarily have a connection yet, I think, again, I'm just asking questions, and I think the public needs to know, is there a connection between anyone locally involved in the Greater Salisbury Committee and Mr. Drew and this entity?
So do you foresee an opportunity at the public hearings? I mean, Matt Drew talked about having a workshop or a work session. I'm not sure what the rules are this week for the city council. Are you given 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
Let's see. Well, it depends on what they try and what they retract. As of right now, officially 3 minutes per citizen, no pre-screening, in the sense of
online forms.
Online forms, so an actual citizen can just go up and say their piece. So unless the city council president changes his mind or tries to change something again, I believe any citizen can go to the next meeting and,
Then their meetings are every other Monday and at the government office building, right?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Mike, thanks for coming out. I appreciate you coming to speak about this. And would you be willing to come back on the show and give us updates as the story unfolds more?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for watching this segment of Open Agenda.